This episode of the Party Loaded podcast is proudly sponsored by Audible.com. Check out their awesome catalogue of audiobooks with over 180,000 titles to choose from. And be sure to grab a free audiobook on us and support the show by visiting audibletrial.com/endgame.
Let's party.
Yep, welcome to the Party Loaded podcast for Wednesday evening, the 20th of March. This is your weekly hit of everything great in the world of video games. We have an extra large helping of said greatness tonight because we've got some fun stuff to talk about in the world of the Googles. Big day today, big announcements. We've got a big discussion happening later, but until then, I'd like to introduce a few of our hosts for tonight. We have Mr. Adrian Chia. Welcome to the show. What's going on?
Hello. How are we, guys?
After announcing everybody in a big heap the last couple of weeks, I figured I'd give us all some breathing space this week. So, Matt Diet, welcome back. What's going on?
Hello. Yes. We've got a big show, so you brought on a big guy.
Sure. Let's go with that. Let's bring on a taller guy in the form of Christian Paulson Brown. I don't know. Are you the tallest out of us? I think you are.
I think technically I am. Am I? Yes, I think I am.
Is it technically tallest the only way to be tallest?
Yeah, but I sit a lot, so.
Right. I don't think. I mean, it's not like you're towering over us, but there's probably a short.
Not yet, anyway.
Why are we even talking about this? We've got video games to talk about. I got no idea what's going on. All right. So my name's Luke Rotelic. Welcome to the show. Tons of things to talk about tonight. We got some interesting news happening in the world of Hearthstone, No Man's Sky, some Bethesda stuff coming up. But I'm gonna kick the show off tonight. I'm gonna take the mic first up for a change, and I want to talk about some Division 2. You guys ready to hear about some Tom Clancy's The Division 2?
Divide me.
Yeah.
Do I have a choice?
I feel like this one's been bubbling for a little while now, and it feels weird that we can finally sort of talk about it being out, because we've had like the multiple rounds of betas like some of the other games have had as of late. But it's finally out, and I will say it is absolutely killing me right now to not be playing it. So I have played a lot of this game over the last week, and Jam has also played a lot of this game over the last week. And a number of our friends have come out of the woodwork and also played a significant amount of this game over the last week. Game is good, guys. It is really, really freaking good. So I guess this is going to be throwing no surprises at you in terms of what you probably read about the game and your comments recently, Matt, from playing the open beta as well. I think the key takeaways in terms of should you play this game, number one, it is a phenomenally good game, but number two is that, yes, it is infinitely more fun with friends. So when you can squad up, it is definitely a game that is more fun. That being said, I think there's a lot of people wondering whether it's a game that you can play solo, and I would absolutely say yes, you can, and it's not even a stretch to do that, because I have played probably about a third of it solo in terms of the missions and side missions and other core content, and I haven't found it to be unreasonably difficult or a negative experience at all. I think it's more that it's just a positive experience when you've got additional people in your squad. So, which is interesting. But yeah, no, we've had one of the other things we experimented a little bit with was actually playing with people at different levels to see how the scaling worked as well. I'm not 100% sure that this is correct, but my understanding of how the level scaling works in this game, the levels range between 1 to 30. And, being at level 30 essentially means end game. So you're starting to, increase your effectiveness with gear at that point, essentially. But up until then, your level in a group, and your group can be up to 4 people typically, scales up to everybody who is not the same level as the highest level player, scales up to 1 below that, I believe. So if I'm in a group with Jam and Ollie, for instance, which is one that we experimented with, and I'm level 20, Jam's level 16, and Ollie's level 5, then Jam scales up to 19, and Ollie does as well, I believe. And the big sort of difference is just going to be the gear that we've got. So, and that's kind of interesting, because even though the level scales up and that sort of gives you some inherent built-in survivability with regards to how your character's stats work, your gear doesn't automatically sort of get more dangerous at the same time. There's not a huge difference between the effectiveness of your weapons, but I think there's enough that even though your level scaled, you're still not quite as effective as other people in your team who are of a higher level, just due to the gear that you're running around with and some of the tech abilities that you've got. So it's an interesting approach they've taken. I don't think that the enemies necessarily multiply by 3 when you've got 3 people. But the general impression I'm getting from Jam's comments as well is that it seems that the scaling works best when it's 3 or 4 and not as good when it's 2. So
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Do you know if it scales like for instances and such? Because Destiny does do something similar, but doesn't make it visible.
In terms of the level of the enemies that you're fighting, whether they
so like access. So like the reason I compare to Destiny is that when you're out in the game world, things will scale to your level in the game world.
Right.
But when you're doing like a strike or that sort of thing, it doesn't scale so much, and they can choose whether or not things scale or not.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's the same across the board. So,
okay.
Yeah, 'cause, I mean, generally enemies that you find out in the open world, you will be instanced with your team. Like you don't encounter other players unless you're in either safe houses, which are non-combat zones. They're kind of just like meeting places for, equipping and getting missions and picking up bounties and things like that. Or in the dark zones. Because the dark zones are designed as those, PvE, VP sort of multiplayer zones. So I'm not sure the number of players that the Dark Zones cap out at. I think it's 20. I could be a little off there. But I mean, 20 players in a Dark Zone is certainly, fear-inducing enough. You wouldn't want to be too much more because you're always friggin' watching your back in those places. So, and there's 3 of them in the game now. There's not 1. So,
oh, neat.
Yeah, it's cool. They're kind of, each one's slightly different, but it is sort of designed to be like a beginner, intermediate, and a ultra hardcore Dark Zone. So you kind of do go through them as you sort of get more competent in those areas. But yeah, look, I mean, all the basic stuff. The game's freaking beautiful. It's got some of the most awesome sort of areas I've ever seen in Division. Much better than New York for a few reasons. I think one is that the variety of the terrain is just massive in DC compared to New York. Like it's not, this dense urban environment the whole way through the city. There's lots of wide open spaces. There's some sort of polluted lakes. There's huge monuments and landmarks that are, obviously quite recognizable from real DC, but they've got a spin on them. Like they've been taken over by various different sort of military factions and, in some cases defaced and sort of, modded out to be strongholds for certain, mercenary bands and that kind of thing. And you get to go inside a lot of them and explore them, and sometimes there's basement areas and all sorts of stuff. So you get to see stuff that right up close is pretty accurate to what I imagine the real landmarks are. But the coolest parts in the whole game so far, I've got to say, are all of the museum levels. And there's about 3 or 4 of them. And every single museum, like the American Natural History Museum in particular is one of my big favorites, because you go through there and areas of the Natural History Museum are actually made out to look like certain parts of, obviously, American history. And there's this one zone in there, for instance, where it's like a Vietnam scene, and you go in there and there's a whole bunch of, trenches and, American sort of military vehicles and stuff, like in this indoor area, and you can actually hear like a soundtrack playing in the background, which would be playing in the museum of like, choppers overhead, and it almost feels like you've dropped into Apocalypse Now to a certain extent, and stuff like that. There's a planetarium in one of the other museum levels, and you actually end up in a gunfight in the middle of a planetarium while there's like projectors shining stars onto all of these surfaces, and it's really difficult to see what's going on because you've got this shifting colorscape in front of you, and it's tough to sort of spot the things that are trying to shoot you from some of these corners. But they make really clever use of the imagery in each of these areas, and even when you are running through buildings, I feel that they're a lot more varied than they were in the New York setting of the first game, because it's not the same sort of model apartment complex every single time. Like they're all quite unique. There's residential areas that have different sort of ground level sort of room structures that you go through. You're always turning in different directions. I don't think I've gone through one that's the same as another one yet. I think they're all actually different. I could be wrong about that, but it certainly seems like they've all taken a unique design to the architecture. So, but yeah, no, it's great. The game is just very fun to run around in. I'm certainly not lacking for stuff to do, but I don't feel like you're overloaded either. Like like with a lot of open world games, you either sort of go between a sort of node-based system where you complete something and then a whole bunch of things drop onto the map. And it feels like you just go through all of them and then you're left starved for stuff to do, and then you have to do the next major story sort of piece to unlock the next set. Or the other extreme, which is you just get dumped with everything at once and you have so many icons on the map flashing that you just feel overwhelmed. It's a happy medium between the two. So and there's a lot of stuff that's not sort of tied to main progression either, which does give you bonuses for completing, but you don't ever feel compelled to. It's kind of like a side activity that is fun. You do it if you have time, if you want to. But the upgrades it gives you are things that, like in a lot of cases, it's upgrading some of the settlement zones that you're in. So, for instance, there's a settlement in Theatre District, which is based on the rooftops, and by doing some of these side activities, you can get them, a better piping for their drinking water, a video game area for the kids that are in there as survivors, an electric power generator that's like a turbine that floats over the rooftops, things like that. Just things that make the area look cool. Do give you a few sort of bonuses in terms of the gear that you receive, but nothing major enough that you feel like you have to go through all of these before continuing. So, but yeah, it's just a really good game. I haven't even hit endgame yet, and I'm having the time of my life. So I checked my time just before we started tonight, and I'm 23 hours in since it released on Friday. Wow. So yeah.
You haven't answered the most important question, Luke.
What is the most important question?
Is there a team of evil garbage men in this game like there is in the first one?
Well, you know how in the first game, like there was 3 distinct factions and they had their thing? Like one was a firefighter faction that had like flamethrowers galore.
It was so stupid.
Yeah, it was. It was very much like, they had it was almost like Pokemon, starter Pokemon. Like one was the fire type, one was the disease
garbage type.
I don't know. It's weird. So in Division 2, the diversity of enemy types is much better. Much, much better. There's a lot of different sorts of dudes. I didn't encounter a single flamethrower until I hit about level 20. So they're definitely out there, but they're not going back to the same tropes as the previous game, which is great. But the AI in this game it seems to me like it's a lot cleverer. Like they've got some neat tricks that caught me out when they started doing it and made me really think, holy crap, this is actually something you have to strategically work out what to do. One classic example is there's a lot of enemies now that just drop down and sort of lie on the floor and shoot you from a prone position so that they're less of a target. And when you shoot back at them, you're usually shooting and hitting their helmet because that's the thing that's facing you. So you actually have to smash through the helmet before you start doing damage to their bodies. So
I've heard that's a good way they've like mitigated the bullet sponge thing.
Yeah. The bullet sponging is not gone by any length, but it is way better than the first game, and it's all based on that armor sort of stuff. So typically, when you face a boss level enemy, you can focus on one area of him and try and break his armor, and then that creates a weak spot, and then you can take him down pretty quickly through there. So if you do manage to shatter someone's helmet, for instance, you can usually kill them with even like a couple of well placed shots, even at boss level. So. Bosses can totally go down with a couple of shots if you get the right spot.
I have two more quick questions.
Yeah.
So one, are there more than 2 cosmetics for your character?
What do you mean in terms of two?
Like,
two categories?
are there? You've got 2 types of pants in the game, or do you get more than 2 types of pants?
Oh no, there's heaps. There's heaps and heaps.
Good.
Yeah.
All right, so it's better than Anthem.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
and then
more pants.
My final question is: do you get to save the Declaration of Independence?
Yes, you do. You absolutely do.
It's literally one of the first quests. I did it during the beta.
Yeah,
you steal the Declaration of Independence. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's great. You literally have to break into the vault where it's stored and pull it out. And the reasoning behind it, the reasoning behind each of these individual missions in its own inner bubble is kind of cool. As a whole, the game has fuck all story. Like, it's not a narrative game by any stretch. You do not play this for the hard-hitting, gripping Tom Clancy sort of story as an overarching thing. It's almost like a bite-sized kind of chapter biopic in a way. So don't think that's what you're going in for. But the chapter where you go in and steal the Declaration of Independence, it's very much about restoring morale to the survivors. Like they recognize that sort of artifact as a symbol, and that's why you're going to get it, not because of any other reason. So, and even
there's no Nicolas Cage.
No, there's no Nicolas Cage. There is a bit of sort of malarkey involved in getting the thing out because it is locked in a vault. So you have to sort of find your way in there and break into the vault, which is kind of cool.
Luke, can you briefly explain? This is going to sound silly after listening to it for so long, but what is the gameplay? Because I don't actually understand.
So, Division 2 is a cover-based shooter. It's a third-person cover-based shooter. So. If you've ever played, it's a bad comparison because the game doesn't feel the same. But in terms of the style, it's like Gears of War.
Okay.
In that you're basically focusing on tactically trying to take down enemies by sort of using the environment to your advantage and the different weapon types. But because you're in an environment where you're dealing with sort of high-tech sort of, special agent solutions to some of these problems, it's not just running in with pistols and machine guns. You've got all sorts of crazy ways to try and deal with enemies. You've got drones with machine guns on them. You've got seeker mines that you can roll out and they sort of split off and roll after enemies. You've got placeable turrets you can put down to cover like a flank while you go around the other side. You can actually deploy a riot shield. And there's a really cool shield which has a deflector property. So you can literally charge into an enemy with this deflector shield. And if they start shooting at you, they're probably going to start shooting themselves.
Okay, so my question more specifically then is it like other looter shooters where you drop into a mission and then complete the mission and then you evacuate out and that's it, or is there?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, but it also has like some narrative missions in there as well.
Well, there's also an open game world. So the open world that connects all of those areas is absolutely sort of used for the game content as well. So just to give you an idea of some of the activities in this game, you've got your basic main missions, of which there's probably about 20 or so. You've got about probably twice as many side missions as well, which have like loosely based sort of narratives, but they're slightly shorter and slightly less challenging than the main missions, but still cover really sort of cool locations. And then you've got a whole bunch of other things. You've got the 3 dark zones, which I described before, which are kind of, you go into the dark zones to actually get high-end gear. The idea behind it is that the dark zones are actually contaminated areas where in order to sort of pull the gear out, you actually have to get the gear by killing stuff in there and then take it to an extraction point and they extract the gear out before you can claim it once you actually leave the zone. So the challenge there being that other players can actually try and kill you and take your gear away from you before you extract it. So it's a bit of a
PvP element there.
Yeah, a bit of a loot thievery PvP element, but there are downsides to going rogue and shooting other agents as well. There's also bounties. There's like big sort of boss type characters that run around the open world that you can sort of get a bounty to take out. You go take them out and you get high end stuff as well. There's strongholds, which are kind of like the raid equivalent for the game. And there is a stronghold coming in the next few months, which is an 8-man stronghold, which I'm looking forward to. That sounds super cool. What else? There's tons of stuff. There's also sort of held points. So there's like capture points where you can run in there, fire a flare for support, and a whole bunch of NPC agents rock up. And you basically, it's like a point capture. So you can take away from the enemy, and that gives you like another spawn point or fast travel point. And like a loot room that you can sort of go through. And there's tons of collectibles over the map. There's, you can find mobile phones that are dropped places. There's echoes, which are kind of like holographic recreations of things that happened in the city when the virus broke out and everything went to shit. So that's like a collectible, but it's kind of part of the story as well. Unlike running around and picking up sort of written bits of game lore, which I know is annoying and we hate that kind of thing. This is, because it's a holographic reinterpretation, it's like watching a very rough cutscene in holographic form, which I think is better for storytelling because you get the audio and some of the visual as well. So
it sounds much better than an audio log.
It is way better, and it's very in the Division theme too, which is cool. So yeah, I'm finding even the picking up the random mobile phones and things like that. It's a much better method of storytelling because you're getting all of the the voice sort of implications with the vocal language and the way that people are sort of sounding panicked or, fearful, and the actual performances behind that, just way better than reading something off the page. So I'm actually okay with that kind of thing to fill in some of the background lore behind what's happened. And a lot of it's very sort of, piecemeal, that kind of is more character-centric as opposed to, subsidizing the overall story, because the overall story is pretty weak, let's be honest. So, yeah. But, just the general gameplay is so solid. It's like they took the first game, learned from all of the post-launch sort of feedback they had. And let's not forget that Division 1, when it sort of, got a year or so in, Ubisoft turned that game around into something really special. But this is taking the best point of Division 1 and making it even more polished and even better. And it looks like they've got a really good focus on the post sort of game support with the first year's content too, which is all going to be free. Like, there's no paid DLC. You can actually buy a season pass, which gives you early access to some of that stuff and some additional cosmetics. But to access all of the content they're going to be putting out over the first year, it's 100% free. So, yeah. Big fan. Big fan. I would highly recommend it to anyone who likes these kinds of games in general. Adrian, I think despite the setting, you would probably actually enjoy this game from a gameplay perspective.
Yeah, cool.
Comes down to more do you think you would enjoy playing in a group more sort of thing? So
yeah, I would. Yeah, I mean, with most of my gaming experiences, playing in a group always makes it more enjoyable for me. I mean, Destiny 2, I'm not a big fan of Destiny 2, but I really, really enjoyed doing the raids and playing with friends. So I'm sure that would probably make it enjoyable.
Yeah, I think the big difference in terms of the raids is you won't find any of the heavy puzzly kind of content like you do in the Destiny raids, like where you actually need to, stand a certain spot and shoot a certain symbol and perform this action for, a minute or whatever. None of that sort of stuff. A lot of it's very sort of straight up combat sort of stuff. But the puzzle element comes in with the strategy that you need to employ to deal with certain enemies is probably more to the point. Particularly the ones that are heavily armored, because when you start opening up weak spots and they turn their body to you, all of a sudden you have to reposition and trying to work out how to get somewhere without getting shot down as part of the puzzle. So, yeah. Cool. So there, that is the Division 2. I will no doubt be talking a bit more about it in the weeks to come, but I know that Jam is a huge fan as well. It's reviewing quite well too. Like a lot of places have taken a little while to get their reviews out, but I'm seeing some pretty solid 8s and 9s around the place. So, I imagine that this one will be on people's mind for a while to come, but I will leave it there. Otherwise, I'll end up talking all night about it. So that's all I played this week, apart from a little bit of Destiny. So, Adrian, let's throw it to you next. What have you been up to? I know that you haven't had a super heavy gaming week, but yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I like every other week that I'm on this podcast, I play the godforsaken game that is Warframe. But I've also... I actually went searching to play something else. I think I mentioned last week on the podcast that I've been looking for something new because I feel like I need a bit of variety. The caveat to this was that I was dirt poor this week and I had no money. So there was plenty going around that I would have liked to have tried, but instead I went looking for free things. And what I ended up finding was a little game called Shady Knight.
Ooh.
And I came across it on Twitter, funnily enough. I saw like a GIF that someone had posted that I think the developer who made Shady Knight is now working on a follow-up game based on the feedback they received from Shady Knight. So I tracked it down thinking it was the game that was the original GIF I saw, but what I actually found, I think, is the prototype prior to that. And it was made for, if you guys have heard of this, let me know. It's cool. It was a game competition, a game jam called 7D FPS. Have you guys heard of this?
7-day FPS, yeah.
Yeah. So I had no idea what this was, and I only found out about it because I found this game. So does this fit the description of a game jam, Matt? 7-day FPS?
7-day FPS, yeah. So to clarify, 7-day FPS is basically creating a first-person shooter in 7 days is the idea.
Yeah, cool. And so from the website that's still up, it turns out that submissions were in October of 2018. And there's a whole sort of little catalogue of them, which I've located later. But anyway, Shady Knight, all it is like, I didn't know how long it was going to be, but on the website, I downloaded it. It's a free download, and you can donate. And it's like a first-person hack and slash where you just run around a little castle and fight some cubes with swords. It's got a bit of a medieval combat, the game medieval sort of combat style, but it's very basic. It's obviously just slapped together for a game jam, and it was a little bit of fun, and I enjoyed it. It's just disappointing it wasn't anywhere as long as I thought it was going to be, because I guess that's what happens when the game's only 20 meg to download. So
you do devour things very quickly. I think that's part of the issue.
No, I'm talking like 10 minutes. That's how short this thing is.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah. So it wasn't just that.
Game.
It's the fact that it's a game jam game. It's more a concept than a game.
Quite honestly, making a game jam game and getting somebody to play it for 10 minutes is impressive.
Yeah. It was awesome.
Adrian, I wonder when we hit the time where you're looking for something free to play during a particularly poor week, and I managed to convince you to check out Path of Exile with me. I'm sure this is going to happen at some point.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. I'm sure many things will happen. But yeah, it was a discovery born of necessity because I had no money. So
yeah,
and looking at the developer's website, there's all sorts of little concept games there which look quite interesting. So I don't know. It's interesting for me because I've never ever bothered kind of looking at this sort of genre of game before. So who knows? Maybe I'll look further down that rabbit hole. We'll see.
Nice. All right, Christian, how about yourself? What's going on?
Yes. This week, the only game I've played, after our conversation on last week's podcast, I actually decided to play Devil May Cry.
Hey!
The
new one,
I'm playing Devil May Cry.
OG?
OG, I'm playing Devil May Cry 1.
Ooh, okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I discovered I already owned the Devil May Cry HD collection on PC. And so I downloaded that, booted it up, and started playing through the first one. and I'm having a really, really fun time. Considering the game is 18 years old.
Jeez.
2001, the first one came out. It's still really good. Like the core action gameplay is still really fun. The graphics are obviously rough. It's like early PS2 graphics, and then just like polished into HD. But no, it's cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know actually that I found this out reading about it that Devil May Cry originally was prototyped as Resident Evil 4.
Really?
Huh.
Yeah. So originally it was going to be Resident Evil 4, and then they felt like the style didn't fit the Resident Evil franchise because they were looking to like make Resident Evil more action focused, which they did with 4, but they didn't go anywhere near as far as they did with like Devil May Cry. So they repackaged it into a new franchise, which is interesting. A little bit of gaming history.
Yeah.
But you can totally feel the DNA of Resident Evil in it. Like I was surprised how the whole game is basically set in one castle, just like a mansion from Resident Evil 1. And you're just going through rooms. There's like a door animation, just like a Resident Evil game. The whole thing is finding like weird cryptic artifacts to unlock doors. So it's like find the sword and then put it in the knight's hand, and then that opens the door. And like find the gems, and then that opens the trapdoor. Like just classic Resident Evil puzzle style. So the whole thing is that. There's basically no story. It's literally Dante is like in his house, and then this mysterious girl rocks up and goes, "There's a big bad demon. You need to go fight him." And he goes, "Okay," and goes to the castle. That's basically it.
Well, the original Super Mario Brothers had, not much more plot than that. So to be fair,
yeah.
I was just going to say,
occasionally
to talk about like things coming full circle with Resident Evil as well. I don't know if you realize this, but Devil May Cry is actually built using the new RE engine that was developed for Resident Evil 7 and the remake of 2. So
that's right.
Yeah. There you go.
It's interesting. But yeah, I plan on playing right through the franchise by the end of the year and actually getting myself to Devil May Cry 5. But I had committed myself to playing through Castlevania games as well. So maybe I'll be spending a lot of my gaming time this year going through back catalogs. So.
Yep, a very Konami-focused year by the sound of it. Oh, hang on. No, Capcom, Konami. I always get those two mixed up like a noob. Anyway, Matt.
That's me.
Yeah, what's going on?
So I put some more time in with Destiny 2, as I, of course, was going to. I'm going to talk about it really briefly because the main thing I ended up doing, I did some more Gambit Prime, which we talked about before, but I did some more of the Reckoning, which is basically the mode you play to get Gambit Prime gear, and they kind of interact. So you play Gambit Prime to get these little marks, and then you go and turn those marks into a thing that you can turn in during the Reckoning, and you basically are wagering them. And if you beat the Reckoning, then you get a piece of gear, and if you don't beat it, then you get the thing you wager back. So it's not really betting so much as it is, I will do this thing, and if I win, then I'll get loot.
Yeah. I'm glad you get it back, by the way, because that would be infuriating if it wasn't the case.
Because it's a public event type thing, essentially, and you can have your whole team just leave halfway through, and there's no way you can solo it. So if they do that, then you wouldn't get your shit back, and it would suck. But I actually got my light level high enough that I got to try out Tier 2.
I've done Tier 2 as well. Yeah.
Holy shit.
There's a big difference,
Tier 2. A big difference. So I the first experience I had with Tier 2 was with this incredible group. Like, we were just ripping through Reckoning. But the whole way that Tier 2 works is that when it starts out just like Tier 1, where you're basically fighting all these enemies in an area, and you have to basically, by killing enemies without dying, then you prove your ability over the Reckoning, essentially. You're building up this percentage that basically says you're dead. This is how deadly you are. And then once you complete that, in Tier 1, you would fight a boss, and you'd have a limited amount of time to kill that boss. But in Tier 2, a door opens up to this area where you have to go and capture points that load in a piece of a bridge while you're just getting constantly swarmed by enemies. And you and your team members need to work together because otherwise you will just die immediately. And it was incredible with the group that I was playing with. It was just a group of randos, but I was playing as the Healy Sunwalker spec for Warlocks. So I'd run in, I'd chuck down my sword and start healing the group. I had a piece of gear on that as they were killing things and I was killing things, I'd get my super back. So by the time we got to the next point, I'd throw down my sword again. And it was just so good. It felt like playing with a SWAT team, essentially, just running through there, shooting shit, healing each other. At the end of it, you fight a shadow of Oryx, I think it is, and it's just like a boss fight type thing. But yeah, the road there is so good. It's super satisfying, a ton of fun.
Would you agree that it felt very raid area-like?
Yes. I'm finding with a lot of stuff in Destiny, they're actually starting to find ways to put a lot of that raid DNA into other parts of the game.
I agree.
Because like Gambit Prime feels like a raid with PvP in it, and the Reckoning feels like a raid, but you can actually, pug it, basically. So it's really good. But the other main thing that I picked up and started playing is a little indie game called Baba Is You, which I played a little bit of on stream. Holy shit. Like, this game, it's so simple in kind of how it works, like the rule set, but it's so difficult to describe. So you basically have these little blocks, and they have words on them. So Baba is a block, and you have is a block, and you is a block. And if you put those things together, then you become a little sheep character. And so that's the core of the game, basically. And so if you go and get a little block that says rock on it, and you push that down in front of is you and get rid of the Baba part, you now become a rock, and you will move around the map, if there's a rock on the map to become.
Rock is you.
Yeah, rock is you now. Huh. So it's... When you first start playing it, my first experience with it was like, am I really going to enjoy this? Because this feels super easy. And then, like, at puzzle number 7 in the game, it's just like, haha, nope, training wheels are off now, bitch. And it's just ridiculous. Like, the game is mind-melting. I played for 2 hours on stream, and I had to stop. Like, I would normally go for 3 hours, but I was like, I feel like I'm slowly going insane. Like, Christian was there.
It's all like lateral thinking puzzles, right?
Yeah. Like,
it's
I've heard it described as galaxy brain puzzle thinking. Right. Is basically how you have to kind of deal with it, where the whole idea basically being in the galaxy brain meme, like the galaxy brain part is just ridiculously stupid and wouldn't make any sense, but that's how the game works.
So is it like completing puzzles similar to those ones you see where you have to fill in the blanks? Like, when you see 12D of C and it's like 12 days of Christmas or something like that? Like that kind of thinking? No,
it's not like that. So it's basically like a little top-down thing where, okay, so you need to get into this room. Actually, so a really good example was one of the puzzles that I think I did on stream, which basically had you in a space where there was some words that said wall is stop, and you were surrounded by a wall, and you had Baba is you, and you also had Kiki, which is another little character, and push. So you could make Kiki as push and Baba is you, but because the wall is stop thing was up against one of the walls, you couldn't get in there to separate out the words and break the wall so you could step outside and finish the level. And it takes some ridiculous thinking to go and say, okay, well, if I push Kiki into this area, she'll and then remove the Kiki as push part, she'll become non-physical, so I can move the words over her, and then I can make myself Kiki and walk down and break the wall is you words.
Right.
This is like listening to someone describe a dream, Matt. It's absolutely nonsensical.
It doesn't make any sense,
I actually, what it reminded me of strangely is the shrines from Breath of the Wild in a weird way. Because they're these discrete little puzzles, and you've got a set amount of like, sort of things you can interact with. Like in Zelda, it's your bombs and your magnet and your electricity, that sort of thing. Yeah. But in this, it's the different keywords.
Yeah.
And then you have to get to the end of the shrine, the end of the puzzle, which is usually the flag. So that there's always, I think it's pretty much always there's words saying flag is win. So if you get to the flag, you win. And then so you need to figure out how you can arrange these words so that you can play with the game logic to get to the flag and win. And there's just really creative ways of actually manipulating these different keywords so that you can flag as win.
So my question is, if there's a limited number of variables involved in the puzzle, can you just brute force your way through it by trying all the permutations?
No.
Okay. You know what? I imagine it's like one of those...
simple ones you technically could.
Yeah.
I imagine it's like one of those, sliding picture puzzles where like you could... If with enough trial and error and time, eventually maybe work it out. But it's probably less time consuming if you actually think about it and do the brain.
Yeah.
Because it's not
power.
always is functions, so they start adding has and what are the other ones? And so that you could have like Baba has box and then there might be box has key, and then then you need to break open a box to get the key out, and then so there's more than just is values, so it increases the number of like potential outcomes greatly.
It's super interesting. Like the rules are really simple, but the way they expect you to solve puzzles using those rules is ridiculously complicated. So it's like, here's your tool set. It's super straightforward. But the way that you get to the finish point is really complicated. And in a lot of ways, it feels like programming. Like it kind of works in a similar way, where programming is kind of just if then else statements, whereas Baba is basically kind of taking similar rules and then expecting you to figure things out. One of my favorite levels, and it's super creative and just so simple, but it's another one of those ones where it's like, how the hell am I supposed to solve that? Is actually a poem level. It's actually called like a poem for you, and it's really cute because when you get in there, it has the words rose is red, violet is blue, flag is win, Baba is you, and then you have to figure out how you actually are supposed to move those words around so that you can actually get to the flag and win the level.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's really cute. It's super cute and mind-bending, and there are so many times where I'm sitting there just like, how the hell am I supposed to solve this? And then you solve the puzzle and it's like, oh my god, how am I so dumb? How did I not see that?
It sounds like the kind of game that I'd enjoy playing with maybe one person like live locally, but would never want to do with Twitch chat. So
when I was doing it on Twitch, it was actually pretty good.
You know what it sounds like, Matt, is the kind of feedback response you get from playing Portal, where you spend ages looking at it, trying a bunch of things, and then when you finally work it out, you're like, oh, of course.
Okay, I will put it this way. Portal is a straightforward game compared to this.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, Portal is super easy to get through in a very quick amount of time. I've put in 5 hours to Baba Is You, and I'm halfway through the game. It's just nuts. And so much of that time is literally just like half an hour sitting there staring at a puzzle. So,
nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'll file this one under games Luke should not play with Jam.
All right. Well, if we're all done talking about our games, shall we move on to some news?
Now it's time to hear some gaming news. Time for some gaming news.
All right, so our first news item for today is that No Man's Sky Beyond announced. No Man's Sky has a new thing coming out called Beyond. Blah. And it's a new MMO kind of component to the whole game. So they added in Next that basically you could play with a small group of friends, essentially. But in Beyond, they're actually extending that out to be like a large group of other players. And we don't know specific details yet, but this is like the first part of what they're talking about being a 3-part massive piece of free content to all players.
Yeah, it's like they were going to do 3 things and they decided just to merge them all together into one massive expansion.
Yep. Yeah, basically. And like that's so cool. It feels like another part of the No Man's Sky redemption arc, basically. Like they won back so many players with Next, but now this MMO style thing, like there's a lot of potential in that. A lot of people are theorizing, like, are they adding factions? And then, some sort of interspecies conflict, essentially, between different factions. And, there's so much potential in there. Like, it's really, really exciting. But yeah, like, the details are pretty sparse right now. But if the first part of their big 3-part announcement is we're turning No Man's Sky into an MMO, like, what's the other news?
Yeah. Like, I mean, it's not necessarily a game designed for PvP or anything like that, but I actually wouldn't mind if they had a crack at that in No Man's Sky, mostly because the ship-based combat is kind of fun. I actually enjoy that a great deal. So, yeah.
I want to see No Man's Sky turn into what Freelancer was back in the day, if anybody else played Freelancer other than me. But, yeah, because that was a big open world space traveling game with the single player, you could just run around and just do missions for factions and earn reputation, and then you would have an impact on the game environment through doing that. And it had an online multiplayer component where people just kind of, split off and created their own factions. And because you would get attacked by NPCs because you were loyal to this one group, everybody would be like, well, you're fighting my friends, and then you'd end up having, massive wars. And it was never intended to be like an MMO. It was just like small servers, but it was still so good.
Yeah. Well, I was a massive fan of No Man's Sky Next when that came out. Like, I really do think they redeemed the hell out of that game, and I enjoyed it greatly. So I'm pretty excited about this, actually. I'll definitely jump in when it comes out. Yeah, very cool.
Cool. Well, next news is Hearthstone related. Yay! So they've announced the next expansion for Hearthstone, and it's also the first expansion after the yearly reset that's coming. So the first expansion each year, they cut off the expansions from 2 years ago. So they'll be dropping 3 expansions, and that kind of really refreshes the game and like shakes up the meta in a big way. And this new expansion is called Rise of Shadows, and it's like themed around 5 of the main villains from previous expansions coming back. So like Dr. Boom and Hagatha and Rafam, the Supreme Archaeologist, sort of teaming up to make like an evil league of baddies.
I said this on Twitter. I'm totally going to say it again now. It's Hearthstone's answer to Suicide Squad.
It pretty much is, yeah. And they're like in the story, they're like besieging Dalaran, which is a place in World of Warcraft, I guess. And what I like in particular is that the cards, they're actually going to be bringing back keywords from previous expansions. So normally each expansion has 1 or 2 new keywords, and then they won't be reused later on. They'll just kind of come and go. But this time it's kind of like a best of all the previous expansions. Which I think will be really cool. And they are adding a new one too, which is Twin Spell, where after you cast a spell, you'll get another copy of it in your hand. So you basically get 2 for 1 on every Twin Spell, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've been a bit down on Hearthstone recently because it has been getting really stale. So having this reset and a new expansion will be really exciting.
Yeah. I like what they've said with what they're going to do with expansions this year too, because they're going to have like an ongoing narrative theme across the 3 that they're doing in 2019. So some of the characters will actually appear in each of them and follow that story on, and that'll reflect in some of the single player content they're going to add as well. No idea what that's going to look like until we see the second one, of course. But I don't know. I kind of like that angle. It's a bit better than just doing self-contained expansions that don't really mix or connect to each other in any meaningful way. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I like that they've confirmed there's no new hero card in this expansion, because that's like a trend. The last few have each had like a hero card. And I think it can be a bit of a balance issue. So I'm glad they're not kind of running the risk of that, and they're dropping that idea for now. So.
Yeah, sweet. Nice. All right, well, as far as other new content for big games goes, we've also got, finally, after a lot of people have been waiting, it seems like they've been waiting a long time, but realistically, when you think about how long this game's been out, hasn't actually been that long a wait, but the new Battle Pass for Apex Legends for the first season is finally been revealed, and with it comes a new character as well. So they're adding a new a thrill seeker by the name of Octane to the game. And
it's actually just Junkrat.
Yeah, it looks a lot like Junkrat, just who's had an accident and lost both of his legs instead of just one. So, yeah. But he's got some interesting in-game abilities. He does very much the Warlock style thing where he can sacrifice health for abilities. In this case, it's speed. So I don't know exactly how it works, but from what I understand, you'll be able to just basically take a bit of damage and increase his speed for a burst. But he's got like a passive ability that makes him sort of heal ongoing as well, so you won't have to resort to using health packs or anything to fill that gap. It's kind of just like a time elapse thing. The dude looks nuts. He looks like one of those dudes from Borderlands, essentially. The whole character design is very Borderlands.
He looks like what are they called from Mad Max?
Oh,
Mad Boy?
Yeah, exactly. That's sort of aesthetic too. Or like literally any of the enemies we've seen from Rage 2. That sort of style too. So, random, junkyard maniac essentially is the kind of model they've gone for him. He can drop down a jump pad as well, which allows him to spring up into the air. And I don't know what use that is because unlike Fortnite, trying to shoot things while you're flying through the air in Apex is very difficult. So I don't know. Some people obviously have mad skills and be able to pull it off and do sweet, 360 no scopes in midair and just put everybody else to shame. But I am not that person. So that is not
There has
for me.
been apparently some drama about the actual content of the Battle Pass. So, like, apparently a lot of people are very upset that there's not much in there other than some weapon skins and some character skins. Most of it, or like a good chunk of it, is just those little stat things that you can unlock when you're first going into the game. And so a lot of people are like, I'm only going to see this for a couple of seconds. Why am I paying for it? So
yeah, that's it.
I've heard some people a bit disappointed, and apparently it's a bit grindy. Like, it takes longer between levels than like the Fortnite Battle Pass, so it's a bit grindy.
Yeah, you can actually get a version of it that costs a little bit more. So the Battle Pass normally is 950 Apex coins, which is about, I think it's around $15 Australian, roughly, to get 1,000 coins. So, and you can buy a version that costs 2,800 Apex coins instead, and that includes the first 25 levels of the pass already unlocked. So you get a big bunch of the content in one chunk. So if you want to get all the cosmetics straight away, you can pay the premium price and get it. So fulfills both of those angles. But if you wanted to grind through, I think it's all 30 levels of the Battle Pass. That would take you a shitload of time. So this is pretty much for the daily players, I think, that will get through all of it, essentially. But I don't know, I'm glad they've got something. I think it's good to have a Battle Pass, and I'm kind of glad in a way they just haven't directly copied everything that Fortnite's done with it. Because Fortnite do the thing where there's like these additional fun little tasks that change with every season, where you might have to like go somewhere and like do a dance in a particular location, or you might need to go and shoot out a streetlight somewhere or something. There's weird things they do, which are kind of not linked to actually playing and winning games. So you see people running around Fortnite doing odd things that are not actually related to success at the game, which to me seems a bit odd. Like when you're actually in there, in a versus 99 match, and you get killed because you're doing something other than trying to kill 99 other players, that seems a little contrary to the goals of the game to me. So,
no, that's great. I love that part of Fortnite.
do you?
Yeah. That's what engaged me.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Because it gave me something to do other than try to be the best, which I'm not good at.
Yeah. Well, I suppose also if you see other people distracted by that kind of thing, you're much better off able to kill them. So, I don't know, maybe that's a good thing. But yeah, no, it's a different approach. We'll wait and see. It is their first season, so they'll no doubt, get some feedback for this one and respond accordingly. But, all things considered, Apex Legends is still a very, very new game, and I think people forget that. So, yeah, one of those things. Now, aside from Apex Legends, sort of talking about, these random junkyard savages, got us thinking about Rage 2, and that links back to Bethesda. So, Bethesda, we were asking questions recently on the show whether we were going to see Bethesda at E3 this year. Given that we've had some interesting pullouts from that event. We know Sony's not taking the main stage this year. We also know that EA is not doing a press conference for their EA Play event, which they usually run at the same time as E3. Bethesda, however, is. So they're back at E3, and they're going to have a very big Doom Eternal focus this year, it seems. So aside from that, I mean, the only other games that we know that Bethesda have got in the hopper at the moment that they'll no doubt talk a little bit about, this is going to be post-release of Rage 2, so probably wouldn't expect to see too much on that. But there's the Wolfenstein Youngbloods content that hasn't launched yet, so that'll probably still be something mentioned. But then we've got like Elder Scrolls 6 and Starfield, which is still apparently ways off. So whether we'll see anything at all for those, I think is doubtful.
Doubt it.
Yeah. So what else would they have? That's a big question mark. They're going to have to say something about Fallout 76. I'm very curious how they approach the Fallout 76 Fallout. Yeah. Fallout. Yeah, you get the idea. So
they'll come out going, they'll make like a joke about how it's been a bit bumpy and that they appreciate everyone's support for sticking with it, and they'll have like a graphic on their screen that lays out these content drops over the next 6 months, and it'll look impressive, but the game will still be shit. So
yeah, I agree. I think that they can't afford to be too jokey about it though, because that's kind of like they've gotten away with that in the past. But this time, I think an earnest approach would be much better suited to them. So,
absolutely.
wait and see.
Yeah.
But at least they're going to be there. That's good.
I'm going to, I've been watching the E3 stuff really curiously. And at first I was like, E3 being so quiet this year and all these people drawing out kind of was making me think, is E3 finally dying? But the impression I'm actually starting to get is this is the lull before we have a massive storm hit, because we're kind of gearing up for another generation, is kind of the impression I'm getting.
Well, there may be
a lot of people
maybe a new player
that
does something at E3 this year that we didn't really know about before. But I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Given what we know now and what we'll talk about shortly, maybe someone else will be there. Who knows?
Is it Bing?
Well, actually, you joke, but there was a Bing presence there last year. So, yeah. Or was it? Was it
Cool.
Bing? No, it was the Microsoft's streaming service, Mixer, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I get those.
That's not as funny as Bing.
No, that's it. There you go.
So moving on, there's been some announcements of a few game collections coming up. Some coming out of Konami. They're going to be releasing an arcade collection, a Castlevania collection, and a Contra collection. The arcade one, just to be a bunch of their really old sort of 80s arcade titles like Gradius and Twinbee. Actually, I didn't mention at the top of the show, I did play through Gradius as well during the week.
I love that game.
On Nintendo Online.
Yeah.
But I almost forgot about it because with save states, that game is really, really short. It took like 10 minutes to get through the game with save states, so bit of a surprise. Anyway, and then
You mean cheating?
yeah, basically cheating. Yeah,
Exploding the game.
No, not basically cheating. Cheating.
just cheating. Yeah. Just cheating. The Castlevania collection is going to have 8 games, and they have announced 4 of them, which are just Castlevania, Castlevania 2, Castlevania 3, and Castlevania 4. Who would have thought it? And that's pretty cool for me because I said in our Gaming Blind Spot episode that Castlevania was a blind spot for me, and I was planning on playing through the series.
How well has this worked out?
We've
We've got the Resident Evil remake to cover Adrian's needs. We've got the Halo stuff we talked about last week for me, and now we've got, and for you essentially, and now we've got the Castlevania stuff that you spoke about. It's like someone listened to our show and just delivered on every front.
Does this mean that a Fallout 1 and 2 remake has been confirmed tonight?
Yeah, hey, Bethesda E3 conference.
Who knows?
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then, Contra. I never actually really played the Contra games, but it's going to have Super Contra, Super C, Contra 3, etc. So that's just stuff to look forward to later in the year.
Contra's really hard, man. It's really difficult. Save states would probably break that game too, though, so who knows? Yeah.
And the last piece of gaming news for tonight. So Valve wants to stop off-topic review bombing. And I grabbed this one because it was like, what? Like, how the hell is that going to work? And the question is still, how the hell is that going to work? Because they don't really answer the question. But basically, the idea that they have is monitoring anomalous reviews. And I say this with finger quotes. And then they notify an actual team of humans about these anomalous reviews. So they basically just got something monitoring every game on the store in real time for just like, I'm guessing anomalous reviews is basically the game has been getting consistently on average this sort of review. If suddenly it's like all just positive or all just negative, then that would be an anomalous review. So it basically, what they're actually also looking for is if there's a whole bunch of off-topic reviews in there, basically bashing the game and downvoting it because like this has a female character, or I have issues with the DRM for this thing, or I have issues with the end-user license agreement, which are examples that Valve have given, that's considered an off-topic review. And basically, they'll shut down all the reviews from a period of time, and that includes neutral and positive ones. So it's really weird. I don't know how I feel about it. Review bombing has become a massive problem on Steam lately. But it's super interesting their approach to it. We can only really watch and see how it's going to turn out, but I'm really not certain what to make of it.
I think combating review bombing
just take away user reviews.
Well, that's a good solution too. Yeah. Look,
does anybody really judge their opinion on a game based on Steam user reviews?
I don't judge my opinion, but I occasionally
idiots.
will read them to see if anyone says anything interesting. Just like because there's usually a couple of reviews up top that might point out a couple of key issues, and if you see a recurring theme, then that informs you a little bit about the purchase, but that's reading the text, not looking at the thumbs up, thumbs down. The thing I was going to say is that user reviews being what they are, obviously they vary in terms of how useful they are, but like when a game is consistently getting a particular score that's been out for a while and then releases like a DLC or an expansion or something like that, and the expansion itself is poorly received because it's bad content, and then it generates a whole bunch of negative reviews at that time, that sort of thing could be sort of seen as like a spike, and almost like the same kind of thing that happens when a game's being review bombed. But in actuality, it could just be due to that content specifically, because you can't put a review in for an expansion on its own. You still have to put it under the main game header. when it does
or
release.
a patch or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and that's a good example too. Like if they patched a game and the patch broke the game and actually made it unplayable, and they had been dragging their feet, sort of doing something about resolving that, then I think it's entirely justifiable for them to be copying a bunch of negative reviews. So,
and that's where the review team will actually have to come in and basically say, no, this is justifiable and not for off-topic reasons, right? Like they very, very clearly specify that this is targeting off-topic reviews and not necessarily review bombing. It's off-topic review bombing rather than there's a good reason for the review bombing, right?
No, fair enough. It sounds very similar to what's happened recently on Rotten Tomatoes, actually. With
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like, at the very least, the Steam review system cannot be as bad as the Metacritic review system for users, where, hey, I didn't like this thing, so I'm just going to vote it 0, even though that's incredibly unfair, right?
Yeah.
But, like, it does kind of feel like, I agree, you know, do we need user reviews in Steam? I kind of like the fact that the Epic Store doesn't have them, because if you want reviews, you can just go out to different platforms and find that stuff. But it's also just like, it feels like they're stacking systems on top of systems, because if you remember way back in the day, the Steam user reviews basically were just, is it, you know, are the reviews on average good or bad, right? And then they added in the functionalities that says, you know, early reviews were, or no, the current period of reviews, like the most recent 6 months have been positive or negative, but overall they've been negative, right? So you can actually see on No Man's Sky, the reviews are negative, basically, but the most recent reviews are very positive, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. I mean, you can turn all that stuff off anyway. You can literally turn reviews off in Steam, so yeah, whatever. It's interesting that they're spending more brain power trying to deal with this, as opposed to, you know, preventing games that have themes about rape getting put on Steam in the first place. So, yeah, maybe fight the right battles is probably the thing I'd comment. But, yeah. Anywho, all right, well, anyway, speaking of fighting battles, I think it's time for us to move on to our main topic of the night. And there is a new contender stepping onto the stage of the video games industry. And it is a fairly sizable contender at that. So we're going to chat tonight about the incoming digital future in the form of what the heck Google has been up to for the last couple of years. So we have literally just sort of come off last night the massive Google keynote presentation at GDC 2019, where they unveiled the future of gaming that they've been working on for a while. And no, it is not a new console. It is a whole other beast entirely. So we're going to be chatting about a little thing that was presented as Google Stadia. So shall we start with the name? What do you guys think about Stadia as the title that they went for with this thing?
It makes me think of Stevia, the artificial sweetener.
Makes me think of Stadium Arcadia, the Red Hot Chili Peppers album.
Okay, that's not a bad one.
One of my friends pointed out, like, we've had game consoles called, you know, the Mega Drive and Saturn, so, you know, this isn't really out of character for a game console title.
Hey,
but
Mega Drive and Saturn are awesome.
Yeah.
I would have preferred if they just called it the Google Stadium. Like, I don't like the Stadia thing.
On a scale of Stadia to Wii or Xbox One S, I think this is still fine. So
yeah, definitely way better than Wii.
I like the image it conjures up of, like, spectating and, like, sort of like a stadium as a place where people come together. I think obviously that was a deliberate choice. So I mean, I think that resonates well enough. I think I doubt they would have picked any name where we all would have gone, that's awesome. So I think it's good enough.
Yeah, it'll grow in people's minds over time. You're right, though. Like, did we actually confirm, is Stadia the plural of stadiums? Surely not.
I don't
know.
think so. No, I think stadiums is stadiums.
Yeah. I don't know. Oh, anyway, your brain can kind of think that it is without it maybe being the actual case. So it kind of does the job. Yeah.
I think the plural is stadiopodes. I think that's
Stadiopodes?
Yeah, for several.
Stadia?
Yeah,
Stadia. Yeah. They should have gone with Stadia. Anyway. All right, so the basic details of this thing, they basically went through a whole bunch of aspects of what the heck Stadia is over the course of a 1 hour presentation. Now, I found the presentation for the most part to be quite good. They didn't try and add too much of the sort of hype juice, which I think was probably the right tone to take for this thing, because they want it to be a bit more matter of fact and and kind of conjuring an image, and the key audience they had at GDC was developers. So you certainly don't want to put the YouTube influencer sort of brush over that too heavily, even though they did have one or two. But like a lot of sort of senior people within Google sort of coming out, including the CEO, and sort of speaking about their vision for gaming, despite the fact that he's not a gamer and he prefers to play cricket. But I don't know, that was a weird thing I got mentioned. But yeah, no, overall I thought the presentation was quite good. The key stuff that they covered, though, was sort of the vision stuff without talking a lot about individual games or sort of details around pricing or dates or anything like that. So what it essentially is a game streaming platform. So we've been seeing, the world move towards streaming ever more in recent years, with PlayStation sort of looking into it with their, what is the PlayStation service called? PS Now?
PlayStation Now.
Yeah. And of course, Xbox has been making quite big inroads lately with things like their Xbox Game Pass and the idea of
there's been On Live, and GameFly had a streaming service, and Nvidia has a streaming service. So there's quite a few out there.
None of them have really succeeded in sort of setting the world on fire, though. And I think a big part of that has been the timing around the technology, and particularly the internet infrastructure in various parts of the world hasn't really been up to the task. But timing-wise for this one, we're starting to get to that point where they can actually demonstrate a gaming experience, and as they did on stage, and they did previously with the test they ran late last year with Project Yeti, or Project Stream as they sort of later called it. Now they are actually sort of much more reliably putting up a AAA game at 60 FPS across a 1080p resolution. So that the fact that they can actually demonstrate that is, fills us with a lot of confidence. But then we also have the fact that we still live in Australia, so you got to take all of this with bated breath. So, and we're one of the countries, we should probably say this up front, we're one of the countries not included in the initial rollout. So, for obvious fucking reasons.
We still don't have PlayStation Now either, so I don't expect to get it anytime soon.
Yeah. But I mean, even though we're not getting it ourselves, we can still look at the impact that this is going to have on the industry at large, which will ultimately affect us from a distance. So, yeah. But I don't know, what did you guys think about the sort of initial impressions on the message they were giving about the quality of the sort of streaming that they're aiming for and how that was all going to work?
Sounds good.
In theory.
It's a cool concept.
I mean,
but I hope you're ready for me to get technical tonight. Go ahead, Christian.
I felt like the presentation itself didn't drive me to the point of nausea, but I'm strongly averse to these shiny, overly safe, smiley Silicon Valley presentations. I don't know. It's just part of my personality. All these clips of these happy people jumping on their couch and smiling, and it's just, none of it felt authentic to me. Not that Google can ever really feel authentic because it's freaking Google, but the presentation was passable, but still this kind of over-promising that it's going to be the next, amazing new thing. Everyone's going to love it. It's going to solve world hunger, all that sort of stuff. When it's really just I don't know. I don't see it being a revolution in games.
It's quite saccharine. The whole presentation is just over dramatized, over advertised. It's very American, I feel
for sure. Yeah, which is exactly what you expect. I'm not going to hold it against it. It's it doesn't speak to me.
They could have leaned into that a lot harder than they did, though. It certainly wasn't at the level of an E3 presentation. It was much more for the...
I felt it was, personally.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think it was. And that YouTube guy, the game theory dude, oh my God.
Oh, Matt Pat? Yeah.
Oh, within seconds, I wanted to just be beating that dude with a stick. His presentation was so rehearsed and, so ungenuine. It just felt so, over the top, it was like a child. It's like watching a child give a presentation at a school assembly.
I'm afraid if you watch his YouTube videos, that's just Matt Pat.
Yeah, it makes me think that you practice that level of voice and style of communication for long enough when you're making videos, it just becomes your default.
Yeah.
So,
I think he's a tool.
Yeah.
I'm with you right there, Christian.
There's other reasons for that in terms of the credit that he gives to content developers and things, but I don't know. That's a whole other topic.
It was kind of funny that he's been ostracized by a lot of the gaming YouTube community, so it's pretty funny that they wheeled him out to represent them. But that's different topic.
Interesting. All right. Well, Shall we just go over some of the major features that they spruiked and talk about the ins and outs of them? I think that's probably a good place to start. So, all right. So the first thing that they demonstrated was the ability to actually play, reasonably instantly from YouTube integration links. So the idea being that you could have a YouTube trailer for a particular game, and when you get to the closing sort of slide on that presentation, there would perhaps be like a button that says play now, and it would literally enable you to sort of click on the button and then get jumping into the game within, say 5 seconds of hitting that. Now, there wasn't any mention through that link structure of, any sort of payment platform or, any sort of authentication when it came to sort of identifying you as a user account or anything like that. The demonstration they gave was literally you click it and you're playing the game within 5 seconds because there's no sort of startup time or downloads or loading time. The game is, running remotely on a server and it's pretty much ready to go then and there. So,
considering its Google platform, it'll run off your Google account. I'd be willing to bet. So you'll be signed into YouTube. So all of your game licenses and game save states and everything will be attached to your Google account. I'd be willing to bet. So.
Yeah. So I guess one interesting thing with that, depending on how it's going to be linked to any sort of payment system, whether it's going to be subscription based or on a per game basis, that means that you could have pretty much anything functioning as a store. Like you could have a link from a website that goes directly following the same sort of URL, and you could be instantly playing a game from somewhere else. I don't think it necessarily would have to be YouTube, would it? I don't know.
No. I think we haven't covered like one of like the main key features and benefits, which I think we should say now, which is that this Stadia can be played on any device that launches Chrome.
Yeah.
So if it can run Chrome, so a mobile, a laptop, tablet, even a TV with Chromecast, then you can play your Stadia. So I think that anything that runs Chrome can also be a store because you'd be able to purchase like through YouTube on it. So.
Definitely. Yeah.
I 100% guarantee that it's not going to be a storefront. It's going to be Netflix. And you'll basically be paying a subscription on your Google account. And basically, it'll just check to see if you have a subscription. If you don't have a subscription, when you click on that link, it's basically going to say you need to pay for this. If you already have the subscription, though, then you will just basically jump straight in and it'll just start streaming to your device. That's how I see it working.
They've been doing things like this a bit more lately with things like YouTube Red, and there's a new YouTube Music thing that they've done, I think, where it's just subscription-based. So, linking all that sort of stuff in the same sort of ecosystem makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah,
I see there being, my prediction would be the option to purchase individually or have a subscription. And I think the subscription would actually be quite pricey. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just my preferences bleeding through, but I can't imagine a world where it's all subscription based yet. Like that seems too much. I don't know.
In my experiences, subscriptions are usually designed to get more money out of you unless you use it like every day by a large amount. It's that kind of thing where they're usually designed so that they sound like they save you money, but unless you use them a really large amount, they don't end up doing that.
I actually think that the way that the subscription approach has gone in the past has changed a bit in recent years. Like, I think, very much following like the WoW subscription model of ages past, where, you forget you've got the World of Warcraft subscription and you end up sort of bleeding $15 a month, for a while until you actually bother to go in and cancel it. That seems to be the old school approach. These days, the subscription is much more about keeping your eyes in their infrastructure so that you're constantly looking at other offerings and other content they've got. So they actually don't want you to forget about it. They want you in there looking at everything they've got in their sort of, their marketplace essentially, as opposed to forgetting about it and just paying for nothing. So,
I see it integrating more directly with the Google Play Store as it is now. So Google Play Store, you can purchase apps, you can purchase movie rentals, you can purchase books, and then you'll be able to purchase games. I think it'll slot into the Google Play Store.
Yeah, that makes a certain amount of sense. I mean, if it's going to be a subscription model like that, you wonder whether they're actually going to take the highly competitive angle and do, essentially what Netflix have pioneered with the way that they've aggressively priced their service. And now even the way that Xbox is approaching the Game Pass as well, because that's pretty aggressively priced. The focus there is very much just, getting people signed up as opposed to the Game Pass itself being a huge earner in the per person pricing. So, I don't know. Probably a lot more benefit having them in there. And this hasn't even sort of taken into account any potential advertising that might exist within the platform too, because that's typically how YouTube makes its money. So,
well, I mean,
that's an interesting thought.
like World of Warcraft, like you mentioned, right? You know, it has a subscription, but the way their business model works now is that they want you to stay subscribed so that you spend money in their microtransaction store, right?
yeah.
And so I absolutely see microtransactions becoming more and more a standard thing because, hey, we're making our money from a Netflix-style subscription method, which for most developers will not cover their costs. Not unless they're getting money from a big entity like a Netflix style thing. And I'm pretty sure that Google's not interested in funding a whole bunch of game developers to do this stuff other than porting over games that they've already made, I guess.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah, that's a terrifying point about advertising, Luke, where imagining that you're playing a game and then, like on YouTube, get interrupted, 30-second ad reel plays,
fuck that.
back to your game.
No.
That's like the free alternative.
I really hope
screw
not.
that out. That's a nightmare scenario.
No, I don't see that being the case. I mean, it could creep in. I hope not to that degree. Like, if there's a start screen before the game loads that has an ad on it, that could be maybe, a highly offensive, option as well. I don't think people will go
that's
for
more
that.
like a Crunchyroll. They do that where you can watch all their shows for free, but they'll run an ad before the shows.
Yeah, and there could be different tiers to any sort of membership system as well, where you can turn it off with the higher tier or something like that. But in reality, I mean, if YouTube ends up being the portal into a lot of this content, YouTube in itself has that advertising. So if you're going through there to get to the gaming, you're already touching that content. So yeah.
But we know that one thing you will definitely be paying for is the Stadia controller if you want to use it. So they also announced Google's having their own proprietary controller that looks very similar to an Xbox One controller, just with the Switch Pro controller is probably the closest analog. Yeah. And it will allow you to play the games through your Chromecast without the Stadia controller. You can't play with the Chromecast. On a desktop, you can use any USB controller, so you could use your Xbox or PlayStation or a third-party one on desktop, but not on Chromecast or mobile. You will need the Stadia controller. They have also touted it as having the added advantage of being the input method with the least input lag, because a traditional controller, like your PlayStation or your Xbox controller, is going to send that signal to whichever machine you're playing the game on, and then that's going to send it down the internet pipeline to the Google servers data center and then back to you. Whereas the controller it'll bypass any of your local devices and actually send the signal straight to the Google data center and then back to you. So they promise that it's going to have the least input lag of any method. So
yeah, that's interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't hate the controller. That's right.
One thing, because I watched the stream last night as well, and I closed it off up in the last sort of 15-10 minutes because it was quite late. But one thing I'm confused about is the data that you would be using on a device if you're streaming this kind of content onto your device. I assume it's going to be using huge amounts of data, unless I'm understanding something incorrectly about the system.
I think it's a big advantage for
quite
streaming,
well.
actually, because of the way the data's being sent. So think about this, Adrian. You've basically got the game server remotely that's sort of running the game itself and then sending you the signal, the visual signal of what's happening on the game. Now, if you were streaming that game as well, it would be sending the data directly from their servers to the streaming platform, as opposed to what's happening now, where you're...
So when I say streaming, I don't mean streaming it so other people can watch it. Sorry, I just meant
just to yourself,
downloading it and watching it.
Yeah. Well, the point I was about to make is
like,
if you were streaming to a platform like Twitch, it's actually sending that sort of content directly from the game server as opposed to from your computer. Okay. So yeah, I know it's not the question you asked, but I think it's a point worth making anyway, because it is a significantly better situation than what would be happening now currently, where we're using our own bandwidth to do that. So yeah.
Data-wise, this is going to use more than Netflix does. So because Netflix does a lot of video compression, so even 4K Netflix content looks a lot worse than native 4K content if you ran it from a 4K Blu-ray disc. And with Google Stadia, their content will still, by necessity, be compressed, but not as much as Netflix. So they've said that ideal connection speed is 25 megabits per second.
Okay.
But you can run it from 15. They've said, and in their development kits, they allow you to toggle the test bandwidth to actually play around, so you can see what your game's going to need to support it.
Sounds a little bit like how YouTube works at the moment. Yeah, you can toggle.
Yeah. the big problem is latency. Like, that's where this all falls apart for me, because so somebody actually pulled out a chart, and it's actually super interesting. I'm gonna talk about maths. So a standard current gen controller has about like 1 to 2 frames of latency, which is like 13 to 24 milliseconds.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine that, and then add on the latency that you would have in contacting a local server, and you're getting up to maybe 58 to like 109 milliseconds of lag, which is like 4 to 7 frames before your character does the thing you tell it to do.
That's
compared
noticeable.
to 1 to 2. Yeah.
I'm telling you, it's not going to be like at that level. It's not going to be as big a deal as it sounds. Digital Foundry have done some hands-on input lag testing with it, and it does get up. You are pushing 150 milliseconds of input lag through Google Arcadia, Google Stadia. Sorry, but when you you get more input lag from your TV than you do from your controller at the moment. So a smart TV without game mode on was already giving you 40 to 60 milliseconds of input lag. With the game mode on, you can drop that to 10 to 20. But Stadia, it's going to be noticeable in really, really quick applications, like online multiplayer situations. But I really think that people, I'm a perfectionist when it comes to performance. I love my high frame rates. I love my graphics, and I do care about my input lag. And I actually have a bit of faith in this system based on the testing that's been done. That if you have a good connection, then it's going to be okay.
But that's where my major issue is with this, because Stadia is the rich man's gameplay experience. Like, compared to a console now, where you have to go out and you have to pay a couple $100 to purchase it, and up front, that is an expensive cost. Everybody's experience with that thing will be the same. But if you live in a shitty area and not close to the data center, and not in the city, and don't have a high-speed internet connection, Stadia is going to suck for you. Like,
too bad.
It's going to be an awful
it's
experience.
Not for you.
Because it's the rich man's experience. That's my point. Like, until the internet is right, or speeds don't suck, like, that's going to be really awful. And don't even bring into the equation like the situation with the United States, and the fact that ISPs have all that control, and they can just turn around and say, well, hey, we're going to actually, we're going to slow down the speeds of everybody using the Stadia because we're sick and tired of them using so much data. Like, that happens now with Netflix. So how the hell is that going to impact people's experiences with input lag?
What I'm more concerned about, following your logic, Matt, is that, if it's an experience that only some people are going to have access to by sheer virtue of geography, what's really going to bother me is when we start seeing platform exclusives on Stadia. Because at the moment, like, if I super wanted to play like a PS4 game, I go out and buy a PS4. If I super want to play a Stadia game, I can't go out and just buy a solution, because I can't just go out and buy a new house. So
they'll make it available. They're not going to. That's like they're denying themselves profits if they're saying it's Stadia exclusive only. There's like, because again, following Matt's logic, that means the majority of people are not going to be on Stadia.
Yeah.
So by making it a Stadia exclusive, that's not doing them any favors.
It depends, though, because it's ways that they can build games to make use of those additional features, though. Like, there's some things they could build for that platform that literally wouldn't work the same way anywhere else. So
it would need to be as big as the existing platforms, and that means like user base. It would need to be as big and as profitable as Xbox or PlayStation or Nintendo or PC at the moment, which it's unlikely to get to with the current infrastructure. But the exception to this conversation is Google's own Stadia Games and Entertainment. So they have announced their own first-party development studio and said that they will be making games exclusively for Stadia to take advantage of the like raw computing power that's available.
Yeah.
Because we should also say that the hardware that you're running on remotely is actually very impressive hardware. It's not just a standard like Windows 10 PC. It is like a proprietary build using like custom AMD, the Vulkan technology So it's really powerful stuff, and they can do some cool stuff on it that you can't on the current generation of consoles.
They did have a big sort of feature slide showing the teraflops being more than the current gen Xbox and PlayStation
that number
put
in
together.
isolation alone isn't as convincing
I know
as it seems.
It's like
but
them just flopping their big Google dick out on the table, though. That's what the purpose of that kind of thing
It's
is.
literally a teraflop.
Yeah.
Like, so the thing with that as well, don't expect indies on Stadia.
No.
Like, because of the massive amount of computing power, and if Google runs this in a similar way to OnLive, I've heard rumor that apparently if you released a game in OnLive, which is basically what this whole thing is, so it's nothing new or revolutionary. Let's make that clear to begin with. Like, if you actually released a game on OnLive, you actually had to pay for latency, for the server data and everything like that. So bandwidth, basically. So if people were playing your game, you would have to be paying OnLive for the fact that people were playing your game via OnLive. And then OnLive would also be paying you for the fact that those people are paying for a subscription. And for a lot of games, it literally was not worth their time.
Surely they'd revisit that model now, though. That doesn't seem like the sort of thing that would fly in today's age with what they're trying to do now.
Somebody's got to pay for bandwidth.
I don't think Google needs that model.
Yeah.
I think that sounds like something OnLive needed, but like because they were a startup basically, but Google doesn't need that.
If Google are just going to throw money at the problem, then cool. But my whole issue with everything about this announcement is that it's a lot of promises and it sounds cool, but where's the proof that it works, right? Like, if I could go and boot up Stadia right now at home and see for myself that, hey, I actually get a pretty good connection and I don't feel any sort of latency, then cool. But I'm not going to get to be able to do that. And I'm just really not confident that I'm going to have a good experience with it.
Yeah.
They have to announce it first.
Yeah.
Like, that's what they've done. Like,
but
they can't just give it to you without telling you what it is.
No, of course not. But my point is that they haven't shown any of that, right? Like, they didn't go at the conference and say, hey, we're going to go and cut to this guy out in a rural farm on a 56K connection and show you that it still works for him, right?
But they're not going to claim it works for him.
But this is what I mean. Where's the measure? Like, who does it work for?
Well, I mean, their
They've said
test
25 and down to 15.
Yeah, their test last year was the first step of getting the message out about how feasible this technology is. I think when they did the Assassin's Creed sort of run with Project Stream, I think that was obviously it was a bit of a test so they could get some data back, but it was also a PR move to actually demonstrate that this is possible at a standard that actually is desirable. So, yeah.
Yeah, they sat down with Digital Foundry before this event and went through a lot of obviously they've done their own internal testing, but they went through this with a third party group being Digital Foundry and talked to them a lot about the requirements, and they have published the requirements, and so the numbers are out there. It's just a matter of how accurate they are, and if they are inaccurate, it would only be a matter of degree. It's not going to be like they say you need 25 when really you need 80. It's not going to be absurd like that, and it may be you need 25, but on 25 it's pretty dodgy. You really need 35, something like that. And that's really my point, right? Like I'm on 100 megabyte connection sometimes. And sometimes my latency to servers in Perth will just randomly spike up. Like, how is that going to affect my experience, Like, just how much is gameplay going to be impacted by a connection that's not stable, which is 90% of Australian connections?
Yeah. They don't care about you.
That's why they're not releasing here, right?
Well, I'm looking at that and thinking to myself, help me 5G, One Kenobi, you're our only hope. We have a whole other issue here in Australia, and our internet is notoriously bad sort of globally, so I'm sure other people overseas will understand the fight that we're going to have on our hands there, and God knows how long it's going to take to get it as a result. But it is Google. If anyone's capable of getting the infrastructure out here to support it, it would be them. So
Google do already have a data center in Perth, our local town. So
they do.
They've already got one of the data centers here, so it's good.
I mean, so that's honestly one of my other concerns is the fact that, so it's going to be data center kind of reliant. But as I understand how Netflix in Perth works, like you're connecting to an exchange that's actually pulling the data from Sydney. So if that was how Google worked here, you wouldn't be dealing with Perth latency. You'd be technically dealing with Sydney latency, only slightly sped up.
The way they've described it, it would be Perth latency, and it would be better than Perth latency actually, because the way a normal packet works is it goes in a series of hops, and even one packet of data going to the side of Australia might actually hop to 15, 20 different locations, but the Google Stadia is using an intranet system, so it's not actually using the wider internet to do it. It's using it over their own intranet, and it's going to go directly to the data center and back with only one step. So,
which brings you back to it. Theoretically, it sounds good, right?
Yeah,
yeah. They just need to have more sort of show rather than tell at this point.
Yes. Which they'll have when it releases.
Yeah. There'll be multiple stages to this whole approach. Like getting the first presentation out is obviously a high point for them to sort of plant their flag and say, hey, we're in this race. And I think that, they did that reasonably successfully with this hour-long presentation. I think they've made their case. I think they've got enough people out there with sort of confidence to look at the next step of what they're going to present. And we know that the stuff that's going to be coming next is going to start talking a bit more about the structure of how this service is going to operate. So, throughout the rest of the year, because they did say it's going to be rolling out in 2019, so it'll be before the end of the year, we'll start to, as the months go by, start to see more information about the actual pricing structure for the thing, various different plans available, and then the games. They'll start talking about game arrangements they've got with various different publishers to have stuff built to run on Stadia. And they did have a couple during this presentation. Obviously, they've got the existing link with Ubisoft, and Yves Guillemot was in the audience, and his presence there was a pretty big sign of commitment from that company to Stadia, which is good. Also, they had Marty Stratton from id talking up how Doom Eternal was going to run on Stadia as well. And obviously that's something that perked my ears up immediately, because that kind of thing is pretty cool. And having a fast-paced first-person shooter on that platform, I think, is a good way to demonstrate, how high the quality will be. What I'm curious about will be what's going to be the first fighting game to be on there, because that's going to be the real test of latency when it comes to that kind of speed that you're going to operate at a fighting game level, because that's kind of fighting games are typically the industry standard for where you want low latency. This is why. Basically, Evo still runs with corded controllers for the most part, because they don't want to have even like a fraction of a millisecond delay when it comes to competitive play
on CRT TVs as well.
Yeah, exactly. So that's really when you start getting to the nuts and bolts of it. But it'll be an interesting year lead up. What I'm very curious about now is how the competition is going to respond. Because you've got this platform now which is basically saying you don't need to own a console to enjoy AAA games or the AAA gaming experience. And obviously Microsoft and Sony in particular are going to have an answer to that. Because this is kind of the first shot in what is going to be the next generation, but only it's not going to be a console generation this time. It's going to be a games generation that will take multiple shapes. So,
but how can they? They don't have the power and the infrastructure that Google has.
Microsoft might.
PlayStation has PS Now.
Yeah.
So they've kind of already got their small stake in the game, but it's not very good.
Yeah, exactly.
Microsoft is working on streaming technology just like this at the moment, and it's fully expected that they will be talking about that during GDC as well.
Actually, this week. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, apparently.
I personally reckon that the other players aren't going to feel the need to respond to it until if it becomes a success. That may be a mistake. But I don't feel like they're going to change their plans, unless it becomes a huge success. And that could be short-sighted, but I actually think that the two of the main competitors to this aren't actually even Microsoft, Nintendo, and Sony. I think that Amazon and Apple are two major contenders for this, being other sort of tech ecosystem giants. And I think it'd be interesting to see if Apple or Amazon ever respond with any similar sort of product line or alternative.
Apple, the brand that has for some time been synonymous with gaming. So maybe from an iOS perspective, that's about it. Yeah.
Amazon have bought some studios. They bought Iron Galaxy. So Amazon published like Killer Instinct, for example. Oh, wait, no, that's Microsoft. But Amazon have purchased some studios, so they have got some stake in it. And then Apple, I'm not so sure about. So.
Yeah,
Amazon also own the Lumberyard engine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was revealed as of about a year ago now, wasn't it? I think, or it might have been later.
I think it might have been 2 or 3 because I was at the GDC where they announced it.
Oh, there you go. Okay, interesting. So we haven't really heard about a lot of games being created in Lumberyard since then, though. Like it's been noticeably quiet on that front. So
it's more of a AAA engine, but they also did enter into a space where there's a lot of competition for AAA game engines right now. So
definitely, yeah. A lot of proprietary sort of companies making their own as well that end up being used for other games. Like RE Engine being a classic example. It's there's just so many variables that we don't know about how the next generation is going to kick off. But I think this kind of is going to be the first sort of kickoff for it. Like this is the point where we're going to sort of say, okay, now we're not talking about what's going on now. We're talking about what is coming in the next step for whatever the industry is going to look like. This is the beginning. So how much of this will actually come to pass, how much the competition will respond, obviously we'll find out as the year progresses, but this is the point where we can kind of mark the start of the next chapter, I feel. So
I half agree. I really feel like Stadia is not... I don't feel like it's going to sit alongside the other like major console players, mostly for how restrictive it is to access, like because you are going to need good connection. It is going to be a fraction of the same audience, and I really don't feel like it's going to take a huge market chunk away from the other players. It's more going to be complementary to it, is how I see it happening. Yeah. But I'm very well could be wrong, but I see it as a side thing.
Kind of like how the Switch exists next to the other main consoles at the moment.
It's the difference between like this is a portable, game, this is a console game, it's a PC game, right? Like, people that Nintendo and Sony aren't competing with the PC platform. They are more interested in the console war, right? And they're also not considering themselves in competition with anybody on mobile. I don't think they'll see themselves in competition with streaming services like this. Not until one of them goes and makes it like a core component of their console. And my prediction about all of this is that we're probably going to end out discussing this whole thing with Stadia in a couple of years' time about it being ahead of its time. I know I've been speaking super negatively about it, but it's more just I'm worried. There's a lot of unknowns about this where we just don't know stuff, and I want to know. But I do think that it's going to be in the same vein as Microsoft's announcement about Xbox One being an always online console and the sort of backlash that got. I still don't think the world's ready for an always online gaming platform like that. So
yeah, interesting. Well, the only other features that we haven't mentioned yet, which are probably worth just touching on, was one being the state share feature, which was a point where you could have a save state within your game and then instantly sort of share it with somebody else. So theoretically, you could, if you're a streamer or a content creator, you could actually have a save state of your game that you share and allow other people to sort of pick up your game from that point in their own instance, or you could allow people to drop into your game if it's a multiplayer sort of setup, which was quite interesting. I don't know if this state share was the same thing that they were showing as they were bopping between devices. It seemed like it was kind of linked. So where someone would be playing on like a tablet and then put the tablet down and then move over to a laptop and they're picking up at the exact same state that they were in before. No, it's
different. The state share was where you could mark a moment in your game and then share it with other people and they can pick it up from that moment.
Okay, so
it's like sharing an experience and seeing where other people take. It's like marking a point in time, and then other people can pick it up and see where they take it.
So there's a lot of use cases for that. Obviously, you could have you've managed to get a particularly high score in a challenging area for a game like a boss fight or a challenge or something like that, and you could share it with other people and say, "Beat my score," essentially, kind of thing.
That's what Google would want people to do with it, or like some crazy moment happens in a game, like something scary in a horror game, then you share the moment just before it, and everyone else gets to experience it too.
That's pretty cool. And then we also had the Google Assist feature, which they actually have the button on the Google controller for. So it kind of integrates the voice chat feature where you could search for helpful content, such as if you're stuck. The demonstration included like they were showing a challenge tomb from Rise of the Tomb Raider. Rise of the Tomb Raider? Shadow of the Tomb Raider.
It was Rise.
Was it Rise? Okay, so the second one.
Yeah.
And the person was literally speaking into the Google Assist, sort of saying, show me how to beat this dungeon. and it would flip over to a YouTube video which played in the same window. So they didn't have to sort of leave the game to find like a help guide or help video for it. Now, the thing with that, I think, is it's going to be very much sort of based on the content available, because the last thing I want is, if I'm in the middle of the game and I search for some help on how to beat a level, is to open up some random dude's YouTube video where he fires up with this 10-second intro screen and then, "What's up, boys and girls? Let's do it." That sort of thing. That'd take you right out of the game. So fuck that.
Well, they specifically said that it won't do that. It will drop you into the exact moment that you need.
Yeah.
It won't drop you into the beginning of the video.
Surely someone would have to build the content in that manner though for it to work in the same way. So
I think it's using whatever algorithms Google use to identify the section of the game you're in.
Okay, so we're still assuming user content, but it'll actually search for the correct part of that user content. So,
yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, that's a weird one. I don't know. That's something I'll definitely be keen to see more in practice, because it seems very open-ended. And I'd wonder, what algorithm it would use to pick out which video you want, because then obviously YouTube content creators are going to start working very, very hard to make sure that their stuff is the stuff that's automatically referenced from people playing these games. Because that'll equal a lot more hits for them in theory. So, yeah, I don't know, but it's all up in the air. We definitely need some more information. There's question marks all over the place with this thing. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I would like to be excited, but I'm sort of just very curious more than anything at the moment. Curiosity is kind of the overwhelming emotion that I'm feeling.
Yeah, I'm definitely not excited. Like my sort of final thoughts on it are, I think it's a cool experiment. I think that Google are going to do it better than anybody's done it before, just because they've got the biggest data centers and they've got the most money they can push behind it. So I do think it is going to be better than any competitor, but I do think it's going to be for a very small number of people. And I think that even for that small number of people, it may not offer an enticing enough alternative to conventional gaming that they're going to feel the need to really engage with it. But it'll be fun to see what happens.
Sure.
Yeah. I really like Google. Like, I have Google stickers on my laptop, but this whole thing, yeah, it's a really cool idea. I cannot overstate that enough. Like, I think it's super neat, but there's just so much unknowns, and the fact that it feels inaccessible for people that have shitty internet, that I don't think it's going to have the sort of appeal globally that, like an Android phone has. Like, it feels very, very like Apple do elite products. Google usually do accessible ones. This doesn't feel accessible.
Yeah, despite their intentions, it's going to be burdened with the international infrastructure that they're going to have to work with that isn't theirs. So, I don't know. Well, final question, maybe just to wrap things up on, do you think that Google are going to have a significant presence at E3 this year? Or are they going to do
They've said they are, haven't they?
Oh, did they? I didn't catch that.
Yeah, they've announced they're having an E3 conference.
They are, okay. So they're almost going to take that big sort of spot that Sony's vacated in a way.
Sorry, no, my mistake. They've said this summer, which is during like the same time period. So they've evaded specifically saying it'll be at E3, but they've said this summer.
Okay, so whether they do their own thing or whether they actually do sort of rock up at E3 in force will be the big question mark.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if they turned up at E3. I would be very surprised. I think this feels like early stages for a product release. I don't know what else they'd talk about at E3.
Yeah. It would be good in a way for them to do it, though, because then they can kind of be counted amongst that crowd and not seen as a separate thing. But I agree. I think it's, in terms of where they're at with their messaging, maybe the timing won't work out.
I felt like the next announcement in Northern Hemisphere summer, that's going to be the consumer announcement, because this was at GDC.
Yeah.
So they didn't talk about pricing. They didn't talk about the extensive library of games they're going to have. It was more about the tech side of things. So I think that their presentation in the summer will be how much it's going to cost, when it's going to be available, which games are going to be for it, where it's going to be available. It's going to be all those sort of consumer facing details.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm going to disagree with you on it being kind of tech focused, because a lot of the tech details that I would have liked as a developer just weren't there. Like, they were talking about a lot of features, which feels more like a consumer facing thing. It was like halfway in there. Like,
yeah, that sounds fair.
Yeah. More vision centric. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, we have a vision for this really cool thing, and it's like, cool, that sounds like a good idea. Show me it works.
Yeah, definitely. which is kind of getting the developers on side, and then conversations can take place off the stage about the tech specs. They can take it offline and talk to the people directly about
it. The Show Me It Works thing, just another final point on that. They do have people at GDC playing on it, but the internet connection they're using is a Google provided 200 megabit connection. So
not a great proof of concept to show the best possible connection. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. Well, that is the opening salvo from Google on Stadia. So watch this space, I guess, is the end point to wrap on. It's going to be an interesting year to see what they roll out with next. Yeah. There you go. And it's only just begun. We're still only in March. Holy moly. All right. Well, anyway, we'll wrap up there. Thank you, everybody, for listening tonight. If you have thoughts on Stadia, whether you think it's going to be coming in your area, what games you'd like to see on there, any things that you're worried about in terms of our impending digital doom. Is Stadia going to be the first step in a new Skynet? Who knows? Let us know. Send a mail into mail@partyloaded.com and let us know your thoughts. As always, you can catch us on all the socials, at Partyloaded Show on Twitter. Just search for Partyloaded on Facebook, and all of our other links can be found at the hub at channelendgame.com. So this week, guys, I'm going to be playing a whole bunch of Division 2. Surprise! I'm also going to pick up Sekiro, and I think that Christian and I will probably chat about that next week, if I'm guessing.
Fuck
yeah.
Yes.
This is the first I've heard about Christian playing Sekiro.
I'm so excited.
Yeah. I'll do it because I'm an addict and I buy everything. So whether I find enough time to play it is going to be another matter. I'm probably... I still want to finish Devil May Cry. I've still got Division. It's going to soak up a bunch of time. I've got to play some Warframe and some more...
Just do one thing, Luke.
I can't. I just can't.
Just do one thing and do it until you can't do it anymore. No. That's the Adrian way.
That is not my video game hobby. I'm much more of a magpie than that.
Yes.
What about everybody else? Anything interesting?
Everyone loves magpies.
Yeah.
Just Sekiro. So much Sekiro. It's Dark Souls and Tenchu having a sexy baby. So.
Gross.
All right. Well, we'll check in with that sexy baby next week. All right. Thanks, guys.
I'll be doing more Destiny 2.
Destiny 2?
Yeah.
Hey, are you going to try and get up to the third tier of the Reckoning this week? Do you think you're up to that?
I'll try. The big question is going to be, can I get my light level high enough? And apparently to my Destiny addict friend, this week is a really shitty week for getting light levels up. So we'll see what happens.
Why is that?
Apparently just the events that we've all got lined up are not particularly good for getting prime engrams. So we're kind of lacking opportunities this week to get a whole bunch of them. So,
well, man, if you grind through all of those engrams and you're looking for something to do, there's this game that you could join us and play a bit of that Jam might,
Yeah, it's called Warframe.
Nice.
I'm super tempted on Division. I will say that much. Still super tempted.
Keep chipping away at you. You know that. All right. Anyway, thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope you've had a great show. We have. We'll see you again in 7 days' time for the next installment. Until then, good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
The Party Loaded podcast is a Channel Endgame production. For this and more great gaming content, bookmark channelendgame.com.